Admiral Vexithar's ship was so big, it blocked out the sun when it arrived at Earth. The alien commander stood tall on his bridge, looking down at the small blue planet like it was just another rock to collect. His ship had weapons that could turn entire worlds into dust, and he knew it. Down on Earth, President Lee Min-ho was having the worst day of his life. He sat in a room deep underground with all the most important people on the planet. The walls were thick metal, built to survive nuclear war, but everyone knew it wouldn't matter if the aliens decided to attack. 72 hours, Min-ho said, again his voice shaking just a little. The alien's message kept playing in his head like a bad song. Submit completely or watch your world burn. Those were the only choices the Zephyrian Empire ever gave. Defense Minister Kim Jina was angry, really angry. She had studied what happened to other planets when the Empire took over. The aliens didn't just want to rule, they wanted to own everything. They took all the resources, made the people work like slaves, and slowly killed off their culture until nothing was left. I've read the reports from the Andorian system, Gina said, her hands clenched into fists. They turned an entire civilization into workers. No art, no music, no freedom. Just work until you die. General Park Doyen was the kind of man who always had a plan. Even now, with alien warships surrounding Earth, he looked calm. He touched his tablet, and suddenly the room filled, with blue light showing a map of space around Earth. Project Prometheus is ready, he said quietly. Everyone in the room knew what that meant. For 20 years, Earth's best scientists had been working on something secret, something that could fight back against enemies who had conquered thousands. Serve Worlds, Dr. Choi Hana was the smartest person on Earth, and she looked tired. She had been working for 3 days straight, making sure everything was perfect. Her team had built weapons that could do impossible things, weapons that could turn stars themselves into bombs. The stellar manipulation devices are all in position, she said. Hidden in asteroids, disguised as space junk, scattered across 12 different star systems. The Empire thinks we're just another primitive world with simple rockets. President Min-ho looked around the room at his team. These were the people who would decide whether humanity lived free or died fighting. They've done this before, he said. 10,000 worlds have knelt before the Zephyrian Empire. Every single species they've met has either submitted or been destroyed. Defense Minister Gina stood up and walked to the big screen showing Earth from space. The planet looked so peaceful and beautiful, with white clouds swirling over blue oceans. But they've never met humans before, she said. They don't understand us. They think we're like all the others. Dr. Choi Hana smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was the kind of smile someone makes when they're about to do something crazy. Admiral Vexthar is probably laughing right now, she said. He thinks we'll beg for mercy like everyone else. He's about to learn that humans don't beg. We don't kneel. And we definitely don't give up. The room went completely quiet. Outside, night was falling on Earth, maybe for the last time as a free world. President Lee Min-ho stood in front of the cameras, knowing that his next words would either save humanity or doom them forever. But he wasn't just talking to Earth anymore. His tech team had done something incredible. They had broken into the Empire's own communication system and hijacked it completely. Every alien world in the galaxy was about to hear a human voice for the first time. People of the galaxy, Min-ho began, his voice steady and strong. My name is Lee Min-ho and I speak for the human race. The Zephyrian Empire has given us a choice, kneel or die. But there is always a third option that tyrants never mention. On distant worlds where aliens had been slaves for generations, families gathered around their screens in shock. A primitive species was talking back to the Empire. This had never happened before. We choose fire over chains, Min-ho declared. We choose to burn bright rather than live in darkness. And to every enslaved world listening to this, your masters are not gods. They bleed just like you do. Admiral Vexthar was drinking his victory wine when the human's face appeared on his command screen. At first, he thought it was some kind of joke. Then he realized the humans had actually hacked into the Empire's most secure networks. Impossible, he whispered, then started laughing. These primitive fools think they can threaten the Empire? Begin bombardment in 60 hours. I want to enjoy watching them panic first. But down on Earth there was no panic. Commander Yang Taemin sat in a bunker so deep underground that even nuclear weapons couldn't reach it. His fingers moved across control panels that looked like they belonged in a science fiction movie. All Prometheus stations. This is command, he spoke into his headset. Begin final activation sequence. We are go for stellar manipulation. Taemin had been preparing for this moment his entire life. He was the son of a coal miner, but he had studied physics and engineering until he became one of Earth's most brilliant military minds. Now he was about to use the most powerful weapons ever created. Sir, his assistant said quietly, if we do this, there's no going back. The Empire will never stop hunting us. Taemin looked at the photos on his desk. His wife, his 2 young children, his parents. They were all counting on him to protect Earth. If we burn, we take them with us, he whispered. Far across the solar system, Dr. Lim Soo-young was making final adjustments to machines that most people couldn't even imagine. She was a small woman with gentle hands, but she had built weapons that could kill stars. Team leaders report status, she said into her radio. Asteroid Station Alpha is ready, came the first reply. Deep Space Array is online, said another. Voice. All stealth ships have reached their positions, reported the final team. Dr. Lim had hidden her weapons in places the Empire would never think to look. Some were disguised as space rocks floating in empty space. Others were built into human ships that looked too small and weak to be dangerous. Meanwhile, in the darkness between stars, Captain Bae Ji-won piloted her ship toward the Empire's nearest military base. Her vessel was sleek and black, powered by engines that bent space itself. It was completely invisible to alien sensors. Ghost Squadron. This is Ghost Leader, she whispered into her communicator. We are 48 hours from target. Remember, we only get one shot at this. Her squadron of 12 ships was carrying something that would change the war forever. Each ship had a single mission: get close to an important Empire world and deploy their special cargo. Back on Earth, the countdown had begun. In exactly 60 hours, the Empire would start bombing Earth's cities. But humanity had their own countdown running, and theirs would finish first. Captain An Min-seo had been flying through space for 3 days straight, and her hands were shaking from too much coffee and not enough sleep. But she couldn't afford to mess this up. Her small ship was heading toward the most dangerous place in the galaxy, HFY Prime, the Empire's biggest military fortress. 50 billion alien soldiers lived on that world. It had weapons that could destroy entire fleets, shields that could stop nuclear bombs, and defenses that had never been broken in 1,000 years. The Empire thought it was completely safe. They were wrong. Ghost Leader to command, Min-seo whispered into her radio. I can see the target. It's even bigger than the pictures showed. Through her ship's window, HFY Prime looked like a massive metal planet. The entire world was covered in military bases, weapon factories, and training grounds. Millions of warships surrounded it like angry wasps protecting their nest. Command to Ghost Leader, came the reply from Earth. You are clear to begin the mission. Remember, you have exactly 15 minutes to get away once you deploy the package. Min-seo looked at the small metal box sitting next to her pilot seat. It was about the size of a briefcase and didn't look dangerous at all. Most people would think it was just someone's lunch or maybe some computer equipment. But that little box contained the most powerful weapon ever created by human hands. Target confirmed, Min-seo reported, her voice steady even though her heart was pounding. Beginning approach to the star. Star destabilization will begin in 60 seconds. She flew her ship closer to the massive burning ball of gas that gave light and heat to HFY Prime. Her ship's computers were screaming warnings about radiation and heat, but the special shields held. The Prometheus device was designed by Dr. Choi Hanna and her team after years of studying how stars worked. It was so small because it didn't need to be big. It just needed to push the star in exactly the right way to make it collapse on itself. Deploying package now, Min-seo said. She pressed a button, and the briefcase-sized device floated out of her ship toward the star. It looked so tiny compared to the massive burning sun, like throwing a pebble at a mountain. But sometimes a small pebble can start an avalanche. Within minutes, something impossible began to happen. The star started to change color, going from bright yellow to angry red to terrifying blue-white. The Prometheus device was making the star eat itself from the inside. Stellar collapse confirmed, Minseo reported, already turning her ship around to escape. The star is going supernova. Estimated time to explosion, 12 minutes. Admiral Vexthar was in his command center on his flagship when his officers started screaming. The sensors were showing something that couldn't be real. "Sir, the star is destabilizing," his science officer yelled. "The readings are impossible. Stars don't just collapse like this." Vexthar looked at the main screen and felt fear for the first time in centuries. The star that had shined on Kethvar Prime for billions of years was dying right in front of his eyes. "Impossible!" he shouted. "How do these primitive humans possess such technology? Evacuate all ships immediately." But it was too late. The star exploded with the power of 1 trillion nuclear bombs. The light was so bright it could be seen from other star systems. Kethvar Prime, with its 50 billion soldiers and 1,000-year-old defenses, simply vanished in the explosion. Captain Minseo barely escaped the blast wave. Her ship's engines were damaged and her shields were failing, but she was alive. And she had just done something that would change the war forever. News of Kethvar's destruction spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. On every alien world, the same impossible story was being told. Humans had turned a star into a weapon. Back on Earth, President Minho stood before the cameras again. This time, he wasn't asking for anything. He was making a promise. "Kethvar is gone," he said simply. "The Empire's strongest fortress has been erased from existence. They know now we would rather burn the entire galaxy than live as slaves." The Empire's revenge came fast and brutal. Admiral Vexthar was furious about losing Kethvar Prime, and he wanted to make humans pay for embarrassing him. He chose 3 small human colonies that couldn't defend themselves, farming worlds where families had been living peacefully for generations. New Sol was hit first. The plasma bombardment turned the entire planet into a ball of fire in less than an hour. 2 million people died instantly. Then came New Busan and New Daegu. Entire cities vanished under the alien weapons, leaving nothing but smoking craters where children had played just hours before. On Earth, people watched the news, footage, and wept. But their leaders weren't crying, they were planning. 3 worlds, General Park Doyen said quietly, looking at the reports from the destroyed colonies. "They killed 3 of our worlds, so we kill 9 of theirs." Park had been a soldier his entire life, but this was different from any war he'd ever fought. This wasn't about winning territory or resources. This was about sending a message that would echo across the galaxy for 1,000 years. Captain Song Hyunwoo received his orders while his ship was hiding in the shadow of an asteroid. His target was Morthak, an industrial world where the Empire built their weapons and warships. 20 billion alien workers lived there, building the machines that had conquered thousands of planets. "Team Alpha, this is Song," he whispered into his radio. "Beginning final approach to target. Enemy defenses are heavy, but they're not watching their star." Song was different from Captain Minseo. Where she was careful and precise, he was bold and aggressive. He flew his ship straight through the middle of the enemy fleet, using stealth technology that made him invisible to their sensors. Meanwhile, engineer Ko Yejin was approaching the administrative center of Velkaris. This world was like the Empire's giant office building. Millions of bureaucrats and officials who managed the conquered worlds. Ko was a quiet woman who preferred working with machines rather than people, but she understood that sometimes even engineers had to become warriors. "Prometheus device ready for deployment," she reported. "Target star shows optimal conditions for induced collapse." Ko's hands moved smoothly over her controls. She had helped design these weapons, so she knew exactly how to use them. The device floated toward the star, like a small gift wrapped in death. Back on Earth, General Park sat in the war room with screens showing 12 different star systems. Each screen showed a human team approaching their target, ready to turn another star into a weapon. "Commence Operation Burning Trail," Park ordered. "All teams deploy your devices simultaneously." What happened next shocked even the humans who had planned it. 12 stars began dying at exactly the same time. Across a huge section of the galaxy, suns that had burned for billions of years suddenly started collapsing. The industrial world of Morthak exploded first. 20 billion workers never knew what hit them. Then Velcaris vanished in a ball of fire that could be seen from neighboring star systems. One by one, 12 Empire worlds died in the most spectacular way possible. Emperor Zalthrok stood in his palace on the Empire's capital world, watching reports flood in from across his domain. He was the most powerful ruler in galactic history, but for the first time in his life he was truly afraid. "They're madmen," he screamed at his advisors. "These humans will destroy everything. They have no sense of proportion." His chief advisor was shaking so hard he could barely speak. "My lord, we're receiving reports from the outer territories. 17 worlds have declared independence from the Empire. They're calling the humans star burners and saying that the age of Empire is over." "Impossible," Zalthrok roared. "No one rebels against the Empire." But the reports kept coming. On world after world, alien species who had been slaves for centuries were rising up against their masters. They had seen what humans could do, and suddenly the Empire didn't seem so invincible anymore. The iron grip that had held 10,000 worlds was beginning to slip, and everyone in the galaxy knew it. Commander Bei Jiwon had always been good at staying hidden, but now she was hiding on an alien world millions of light years from Earth. She sat in a dark cave on the planet Karshan, surrounded by rebels who had never seen a human before but treated her like a hero. "Earth Command, this is Shadow Base," she whispered into her encrypted communicator. "The Empire is falling apart faster than we expected. I'm seeing rebellions on 17 worlds and counting." Bei had been a spy before the war started, gathering information about the Empire's military strength, but now her job was different. Now she was helping entire civilizations break free from chains they had worn for centuries. Through her cave entrance, she could see the alien city burning in the distance. But these weren't the fires of destruction. They were the fires of revolution. The blue-skinned Karshani people were tearing down the statues of their Empire oppressors and building barricades in the streets. "The cracks are showing everywhere," she reported. "Rebellion on Karshan is spreading to 3 neighboring systems. Mutiny in the Outer Rim fleets. Entire squadrons are abandoning their posts rather than fight us." The local rebel leader, a tall alien named Vorthak, sat down beside her. His people had been slaves for 800 years, forced to mine radioactive crystals that slowly poisoned them. But now they were free, and they had humans to thank for it. "Your star burners have given us something we had forgotten," Vorthak said in broken human language. "Hope. When we saw you destroy Kethvar Prime, we remembered that empires can fall." On the other side of the galaxy, something even more dramatic was happening on the world of Thexmol. This planet had been a major Empire stronghold, protected by a massive fleet of warships. But Captain Kim Jamin had turned that entire fleet into a new star. The former slaves of Thexmol stood in their city squares, looking up at the artificial sun that now hung in their sky. It was made from the melted remains of the ships that had once kept them in chains. The light was different from their old sun, brighter, more fierce, like the spirit of rebellion itself. Kixton was an old alien who had worked in the weapon factories his entire life. His hands were scarred from building the very guns that kept his people enslaved, but now he stood on a platform in the main square, speaking to thousands of his fellow former slaves. "Look up at that new star," he called out, his voice echoing off the buildings. "That light comes from the ships of our oppressors. The starburners have shown us the way, we kneel no more." The crowd roared in approval. They had seen what humans were willing to do, burn entire star systems rather than submit to tyranny. If humans could make that choice, then they could make it too. Meanwhile, on the Empire's capital world, Emperor Zalthrok was discovering that being the most powerful ruler in the galaxy didn't mean much when your empire was collapsing. His emergency council meeting had turned into a shouting match. Generals were blaming admirals, admirals were blaming governors, and everyone was blaming the humans for starting this mess. "Half our fleets refuse orders," General Morgak screamed, slamming his fist on the conference table. "They're terrified that the humans will burn their home systems if they attack Earth." "The Outer Rim colonies have declared independence," Admiral Kesevar shouted back. "They say they'd rather fight us than risk facing the starburners." Emperor Zalthrok looked around the table at his advisors and realized the horrible truth. The empire that had conquered 10,000 worlds was falling apart, not because humans had a bigger army or better weapons, but because they had shown the galaxy something that terrified every tyrant in history. They had shown that some people would rather die free than live as slaves. And once that idea started spreading, no empire in the universe could stop it. Captain No Jiho used to be a quiet man who taught physics at a university on Earth. He loved explaining how stars worked to his students, drawing diagrams of nuclear, fusion and stellar evolution on whiteboards. But the war had changed him into something else entirely, something that made alien warriors wake up screaming from nightmares. They called his ship the Sun Killer now. Jiho sat in his captain's chair, looking completely calm as his ship drifted through empty space. His crew moved around him with the quiet efficiency of people who had done this many times before. They weren't hunting for enemy planets anymore. They were hunting for enemy fleets. "Captain," Lieutenant Yu Hyun called from her sensor station. She was young, barely 25, but the war had made her eyes look much older. "Imperial fleet detected in Sector 7. Looks like a full battle group. 300 ships." Jiho nodded slowly. 300 ships was a lot of firepower. Enough to destroy entire star systems. 6 months ago, a human captain would have run from such a force, but everything had changed since the Starburners began their campaign. "Standard protocol," Jiho replied, his voice as calm as if he was ordering coffee. "No survivors, no negotiations." His ship moved toward the Empire fleet like a shark approaching a school of fish. The enemy ships probably thought they were safe. After all, they outnumbered the humans 300 to 1, but numbers didn't matter when you could kill stars. The Zephyrian admiral commanding the fleet was named Gaxthor, and he had been fighting wars for longer than humans had been using fire. He'd conquered dozens of worlds and never lost a battle, but when his sensors detected the approaching human ship, his hands started shaking. "It's him," Gaxthor whispered to his bridge. "Crew, it's the Sun Killer." The admiral tried something that no Empire commander had ever done before. He tried to surrender. His communications officer sent a message to the human ship. "We yield. We request mercy. Please don't destroy our star." But Jiho's response was always the same. He didn't even bother to reply to the surrender message. Instead, he deployed his Prometheus device toward the system's star and watched it begin the process of stellar collapse. "Sir," Lieutenant Yu said quietly, "they're trying to escape. Some of the ships are jumping to hyperspace." "Let them go," Jiho replied. "Let them tell their friends what they saw here." The star began to change color, going from yellow to red to the brilliant blue-white that meant it was about to explode. The Empire ships that hadn't escaped in time were caught in the growing gravity waves, pulled inexorably toward their doom. Admiral Gaxthor's last words were broadcast across Empire communication networks. "The humans. They don't care about military targets anymore. They're killing everything. Stars, planets, fleets, everything burns." Back in Empire space, the effects of Jiho's campaign were spreading like a disease. Desertion rates in the Imperial Navy had reached levels never seen before. Entire squadrons were abandoning their ships rather than risk encountering the Starburners. Even the elite Zephyrian Guard, the Empire's most fanatical soldiers, were walking away from their posts. These were warriors who had sworn to die before, retreating, but the thought of facing humans who could kill stars was too much for them. Dr. Shin Ariam sat in her laboratory on Earth, analyzing the psychological reports flooding in from across the galaxy. She was a specialist in warfare psychology, and what she was seeing fascinated and horrified her at the same time. "Earth Command, this is Dr. Shin," she reported during her daily briefing. "Enemy morale has completely collapsed. We're seeing mass desertions, mutinies, and even cases of Empire soldiers shooting their own officers to avoid deployment against us." She pulled up charts showing the psychological impact of the Starburner campaign. The numbers were staggering. "They're not even trying to fight us anymore," she continued. "Intelligence reports show that Empire forces would rather fight each other than face the possibility of encountering our stellar weapons. We've created a level of terror that's unprecedented in galactic history. The humans had become the hunters, and the mighty Zephyrian Empire had become the prey. The galaxy's greatest predators were now afraid of their own shadows, wondering if every star in the sky might suddenly explode. Emperor Zalthrok stood in the most secret facility in the galaxy, deep inside the Nexus system, where even his own generals weren't allowed to go. The massive construction project around him was his last hope, a weapon so powerful it could crack planets in half like eggs. "How much longer?" he demanded from the chief engineer, a nervous alien who had been working without sleep for weeks. "3 more days, my lord," the engineer replied, his voice shaking. "The planet killer will be ready to fire at Earth in 3 days. Zalthrok smiled for the first time in months. This weapon was different from anything the Empire had ever built. Instead of burning planets with plasma or bombing them from orbit, it would literally tear Earth apart from the inside. The humans could kill stars, but they couldn't survive if their home planet no longer existed. But what the Emperor didn't know was that Agent Moon Gunwoo had been watching him from the shadows. Gunwoo was small and quiet, the kind of person who could disappear in a crowd of 3 people. He had been pretending to be a maintenance worker in the facility for 2 months, cleaning floors and emptying trash, while secretly photographing everything he saw. "Earth Command, this is Ghost 7, he whispered into his hidden communicator, while hiding in a supply closet. "Planet killer confirmed. The weapon is almost complete. It's designed to destabilize Earth's core and tear the planet apart." He paused, watching Empire workers rush past his hiding spot. "Beginning final phase of the mission. If I don't make it out, tell my family I kept my promise." Gunwoo's mission was simple but incredibly dangerous. He had to plant explosives in exactly the right places to destroy the planet killer before it could fire. But the facility was crawling with guards, and if they caught him, Earth would have no warning before the attack. Meanwhile, Admiral Won Seojin stood on the bridge of humanity's flagship, looking out at what remained of Earth's space fleet. 6 months ago, they had started with over 1,000 ships. Now he had fewer than 500, and most of those were damaged from previous battles. But these ships and crews had been through hell together. They had learned to fight impossible odds and win. They had stared death in the face so many times that they weren't afraid anymore. "Admiral," his communications officer reported, "we just received Agent Gunwoo's intelligence about the planet killer. Earth Command is ordering an immediate assault on Zephyr Prime." Seojin nodded grimly. Zephyr Prime was the Empire's capital world, protected by more weapons and shields than anywhere else in the galaxy. It was supposed to be unconquerable. "All ships, this is Admiral Seojin," he announced over the fleet communications. "Today we assault the Empire's homeworld. Today we prove that no tyranny is too big to fall." He looked around his bridge at the young officers who had become legends. Lieutenant Park Minji, who had survived 3 ship explosions, Commander Lee Junho, who had personally destroyed 2 Empire battle groups, Engineer Kim Daeun, who could fix anything with spare parts and determination. "Prepare for assault on Zephyr Prime," Seojin ordered. "Today we end this war, one way or another." The fleet began moving toward the Empire's capital system, knowing that this would be the final battle. Either they would break the greatest empire in galactic history, or Earth would burn under the planet killer's terrible power. Behind them, Agent Gunwoo was running through the corridors of the secret facility, alarms blaring as Empire guards discovered his sabotage. He had successfully planted his explosives, but now he had to escape before they caught him. "Come on," he whispered to himself, racing toward the hangar where he had hidden a small escape ship. Just a few more minutes. The fate of humanity now depended on a quiet spy and a damaged fleet attacking the most heavily defended world in the galaxy. But humans had learned something important during this war. Sometimes the impossible was just another word for Tuesday. The battle for Zephyr Prime was like nothing the galaxy had ever seen before. Admiral Won Seojin watched from his command ship as the Empire's homeworld grew larger on the screen, surrounded by more defensive weapons than any planet in history. "All ships begin the assault," he ordered, knowing that many of his crews would not see another sunrise. The Empire had turned their capital world into the ultimate fortress. Massive orbital platforms bristled with weapons that could vaporize entire fleets. Shield generators the size of cities protected the planet's surface. Millions of fighter craft swarmed out to meet the approaching human fleet like angry hornets. But the humans kept coming. Captain Kim Silgi, flew her ship through a storm of enemy fire, her hull already glowing red from the heat of multiple hits. She had been a commercial pilot before the war, flying cargo ships between Earth's colonies. Now she was leading a squadron of volunteers on a suicide mission. "Dragon Squadron, follow me in," she called over the radio. "Target the shield generators first." Her ship shook as another enemy blast tore through her shields. Warning lights flashed red across her control panel, and she could smell smoke from burning circuits, but she kept flying toward the massive planetary defenses. One by one, the human ships were being destroyed. The Empire's weapons were too powerful, their defenses too strong. For every enemy ship the humans destroyed, they lost 3 of their own. But something strange was happening. Even as human ships burned and exploded around Zephyr Prime, the survivors kept attacking. They didn't retreat, didn't ask for mercy, didn't try to negotiate. They just kept coming like waves crashing against a beach. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Commander Yu Heun from the flagship, "we've lost 60% of our fleet. Should we withdraw?" Admiral Seojin looked at the tactical display, showing the terrible losses his people were taking. Any sane military commander would have ordered a retreat by now. "Negative," he said firmly. "We finish this today." Captain Silgi's ship was dying around her. Her engines were failing, her weapons were gone, and her life support was leaking air into space. But she could see her target through the smoke and flames, the Imperial Palace, where Emperor Zalthrok ruled his empire of slaves. "This is Dragon. Leader," she announced over the radio, her voice calm despite the chaos around her. "I'm going to ram the palace. Tell my parents I love them." "Silgi, no!" Admiral Seojin's voice crackled through the static. "Find another way." But Captain Silgi had already made her choice. She pointed her dying ship straight at the massive golden palace that sat in the center of the capital city, like a crown jewel. "For Earth!" she screamed as her ship's reactor overloaded. The explosion lit up the entire planet. Captain Silgi's ship had become a miniature star, punching through the palace's shields and turning the center of the Empire's government into a crater of molten metal. When the smoke and flames finally cleared, Emperor Zalthrok lay dead in what remained of his throne room. The tyrant who had ruled 10,000 worlds for centuries was gone, killed by a cargo pilot from a planet he had considered primitive. Back on Earth, President Minho stood in his office looking out at a world scarred by war. The planet's surface was marked with craters from Empire bombardments, and the skies were filled with the trails of burning ships. But Earth was still free, and that was what mattered. "Citizens of Earth and the galaxy," he announced in a broadcast that reached every corner of known space. "The Empire is broken. Emperor Zalthrok is dead. Their fleets are scattered, and their grip on the galaxy has been shattered forever." Across thousands of worlds, former slaves looked up at their skies and saw human ships limping home. These ships were damaged and battered, carrying the survivors of humanity's greatest gamble. But they were also carrying something more important, proof that even the mightiest empire could fall when people refused to kneel. The age of the Zephyrian Empire was over. The age of freedom had begun. 6 months after Emperor Zalthrok's death, the galaxy looked completely different. Where once there had been one massive empire controlling everything, now there were hundreds of free worlds working together as equals. Ambassador Li Dayung walked slowly toward the speaking platform in the Great Assembly Hall on New Geneva Station. This massive space station had been built in neutral space, where representatives from every free world could meet safely. The hall was filled with aliens of every shape and size, beings with blue skin, others with tentacles, some that looked like walking trees and creatures that glowed with their own inner light. All of them had once been slaves. Now they were free. "Representatives of the Galactic Assembly," Dayung began, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. She was nervous. This was the most important speech in galactic history, but she kept her voice steady. 6 months ago, the Zephyrian Empire demanded that humanity kneel. We chose a different path. We fought not for conquest, not for resources, not for glory. We fought for freedom, not just our own, but for everyone. The hall erupted in cheers from hundreds of different species. Some clapped with hands, others made clicking sounds with their claws, and a few sang in harmonies that sounded like music. From heaven. Today we sign the Phoenix Accords, Dayung continued when the noise died down. These agreements promise that never again will one species kneel before another, never again will slavery be tolerated, and never again will tyranny go unchallenged. The former Zephyrian Empire had been broken into pieces and given back to the species who had originally lived there. The blue-skinned people of Karshan got their mining worlds back. The gentle tree-like beings of Velkaris reclaimed their forest planets. Dozens of other species were finally going home after centuries of exile, but someone had to keep the peace and make sure no new empire rose to replace the old one. Surprisingly, that job fell to humanity, the same species that had almost burned the galaxy down rather than submit. On Earth, the scars of war were slowly healing. New cities were being built where the old ones had been destroyed. But some scars were meant to stay. The memorial gardens covered hundreds of square kilometers in what used to be downtown Seoul. Each flower represented someone who had died in the war, not just humans, but every being who had fought for freedom. Children from Earth's schools came here every day to learn about the price of liberty. Why did so many people have to die? Asked young Kim Sujin, a 10-year-old girl holding her teacher's hand as they walked through the gardens. Her teacher, Ms. Park Sun-hee, knelt down to the child's level. Because some things are more important than living, Sujin. Freedom is one of those things. Your parents and grandparents taught the whole galaxy that lesson. Admiral Choi Min-jae sat in her office on Lunar Base, reading reports from across known space. She was older now, with gray hair and lines around her eyes from years of worry, but she smiled as she read the latest intelligence summaries. No major conflicts, she murmured to herself. 3 minor disputes resolved through negotiation. 17 new worlds applying to join the assembly. Her aide, Captain Lim Taeyang, looked up from his own reports. Admiral, the Andromedan Council is asking for our help with pirates in Sector 12. Send the Third Fleet, Min-jae replied. Rules of engagement are to capture, not kill. We're peacekeepers now, not warriors. She leaned back in her chair and looked out the window at Earth, hanging in the black sky like a blue marble. The planet looked peaceful from here, but she knew the truth. Humans had proven something to the galaxy that would never be forgotten. They learned, she said quietly, that humans would rather burn everything than live in chains. And now, because of that lesson, no one has to live in chains anymore. The galaxy would never forget the species that chose fire over submission, and because of their choice, the fires of freedom now burned on 10,000 worlds.